What we're going to do now is we are going to ask Lieutenant Colonel retired Tom Burgess to come up and talk to us about his experience flying in an AWACS aircraft in Desert Storm. I want to give you a little bio information on Colonel Burgess. He retired as an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel with 23 years of service. He flew as a senior director on the E-3C AWACS and mission crew commander on the E-8C Joint STARS surveillance aircraft. Over 900 combat flying hours in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom. 3 years associate professor at the United States Air Force Academy, 1 year as a squadron commander, and 3 years in counter drugs, 1 year in Korea. So he has been there, done that, got that t-shirt. Speaking as a user of the AWACS stuff, I went to the desert back in Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and was at 3rd Army headquarters. Our motto was, "I won't fight and you can't make me." But that was 3rd Army now. That wasn't all of our subordinate. But anyway, so that, I never heard a shot fired in anger in the desert. But we did get a lot of stuff in the operations center coming off of your guys' aircraft, and it was amazing to me. I mean, we were seeing Republican Guard, where Republican Guard tanks were up on the Kuwaiti border. And the amount of information was incredible, and it was also very timely because they were up there, doing their thing. So anyway, Tom, if you would like to come up.
Okay, we good? All right. I've been asked to tilt this down. Well, thank you for having me. Is that loud enough? Yeah, that's fine. Great lunch. It's an honor to stand in front of so many American vets, patriots. It's wonderful how to start a meeting. How can you beat having the piano doing all the different anthems of the services? So thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. So let's see. So this came about because a friend of mine was in the FBI. He's in my Rotary Club. We were having a beer. He was telling me stories. I was telling him stories. He said, "You should tell your Desert Storm story to our Rotary Club." I said, "There's nothing to do with Rotary." Next thing I knew, I was on the speaker's docket, and I gave the presentation, and then I was asked to do it at another one. So I've done it several times now. It's kind of a fun story. This is the stationery for the official stationery for Desert Storm. I'm trying to find the pointer on this thing without my glasses. I don't think I can do it. Which one button am I hitting?
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Here,
I'll
be your slide flipper.
You sure? There's no way to go. It was working before.
I know it was. That's.
Okay, so I can't walk around? I'm terrible about not walking around. All right, so backing up, the stationery for Desert Storm had the E3 prominently displayed. It was definitely a big factor in the war. When I give this talk to people that are not in the military, one of the things I talk about is when you deploy and your whole world is whatever the conflict is that you're involved in, that's your world 24 hours a day, and you all know that. You eat, sleep, we're getting mission briefs, all our intel, the TV we're watching is Armed Forces television, and I'm talking to guys every night that are getting shot at, and then you come home and there's nothing on the news, and you don't hear anything, and you feel like, what are we doing here? We're worried about political nothings, and there's a war going on over there. So I definitely get why we've got the number of vets. They report 22 a day committing suicide. We know that number is false. Texas and California don't report. But I always try to remind folks that we really owe a debt of gratitude to all the guys that have been serving. I've been told to move over. Since 91, because we haven't had to have a draft since Vietnam and Korea, and it's because folks have volunteered to go back time and time again. So keep their families in your prayers. These are the guys that I supported both on AWACS and then my latter part of my career in Joint Stars. All right, so I started my career on the E3, old 707s with a 33-foot by 6-foot tall dome. That's the big feature. Everybody knows about them. Amazing weapon system. So this thing can see unclassified 350 miles. So what does that mean in real term? If I'm flying over Atlanta, I can see, up into Raleigh, down into Tallahassee, Mississippi. So that's a pretty large area unclassified that we could control aircraft in. So a huge capability for sure. We would get refueled normally right after takeoff. The desert was too hot to be full of fuel when we took off. So we would get 180,000 pounds right after takeoff. We'd fly about 8 hours. We'd get another tanker would come up and refuel us, another 180. And if we were on a real long sortie, that might happen a third time. I was always amazed from the first time I saw this. To me, I equate it to a fighter going up behind a tanker. No big deal. That's a Porsche pulling up to an 18-wheeler. But two planes this big should never be connected by a solid boom. That just made no sense to me whatsoever, especially for as long as we had to stay on the tanker to get the gas that we had to every mission. So hats off to the pilots during that time frame. This was my office for the sorties. AWACS has 4 guys in the front and 14 in the back for a combat sortie. The pilots called us self-loading baggage. We called them the bus drivers. It was a beautiful relationship. Funny thing about this is underneath the seats, there was supposed to be a parachute when you went into combat. So we got our POW training, our survival training, all that. And we got drugged behind trucks so you could learn how to get out of your risers for parachute training. And also we had to go through parachute training. Well, we go to deploy, and of course we flip up the seats, and there's no parachutes. And we said, well, what's up with that? And they said, well, there's so many antennas on the bottom of the plane. There was actually a bailout chute that punched down through the bottom of the plane. You'd have a bar, you'd drop down. They said, we've added so many antennas since then, you'd probably get wiped out if you tried to bail out of it. They were like, well, can we try? Because the other alternative isn't so great, but no parachutes. There's me at Surviving. I know Air Force survival training is nothing like the rest of you guys, but hey, what the heck, it was fun. Distinguishing features, antennas everywhere. We can talk to everybody, data links, an amazing weapon system for sure. My job was to be the pilot's third wingman. So he's got a wingman. They can see out the front of their planes extremely well. But their range is limited and they cannot see the rest of the way around the plane. So my job was to give him the visual that he couldn't get from his onboard systems. So we, like I say, an F-16, any of these modern day 5th generation fighters, they can see very, very well. They have great situational awareness in front of them. If they get hit by a missile, I can direct them to a base. If they punch out, I can get search and rescue or quick reaction forces on the ground. But we had to learn all weapon systems that the U.S. had. We had to learn surface-to-air missiles. We had to learn air-to-air missiles, air-to-surface missiles. We had to learn all enemy weapon systems, enemy radars. It actually took longer to train me as a weapons controller than the guy who was flying the F-16 from start to finish. It was a whole bunch of stuff we had to digest. So that's kind of what the consoles look like. Pretty interesting of how the body works. When you first started training, you would listen to one external radio and one internal radio. As you progressed, you were required to be able to listen to more and more radios. When you finished your training and you were mission ready, you had to be able to listen to 5 external, 3 internal, and a guard radio at the same time. And if you just stuck that in your ear, like I listened to a recording of one of my missions and it just sounds like garbage, but your brain filters and will not listen to what you don't need to hear, and suddenly the radar operator says, hey, the system just went down. Man, you keyed on that and you could pick that out of all this chatter that was going on. It was pretty incredible. So anywhere from 8 to my longest was 22 hours, which was the first night of Desert Storm. That's where we were sitting at. As you know, when Saddam invaded Kuwait, It wasn't a war. Combat lasted 2 days. The overwhelming force, there was nothing the Kuwaitis could do about it. I think, by the way, that's what Putin thought was going to happen when he invaded, that it was going to be awfully short-lived. So they just basically steamrolled over the Kuwaiti armies. Remember, Iraq's been at war with Iran for forever, so very well-trained forces, Republican Guard forces, etc. And after they went in, they just pillaged the country. I mean, the briefings that we got were just horrific of the stuff that they were doing there. I mean, dumping incubators up. They just pillaged the country. They sent everything back. So they dumped babies out of incubators. The torture chambers we saw, they were raping women and kids. It was really awful. A lot of that intel didn't make it out to the civilian world, but I'm 27 years old. I'm in my prime. I want to get over there, and I want to kick this guy out of the country really, really bad. I was an evaluator. I'd been in for 5 years, and then the wing said, sorry, all you evaluators have to stay home because you have to qualify new crew members so they can deploy, and you've got to requalify guys so that they can go over there. So we were really frustrated, to say the least. And then just before, probably a month before the kickoff, they said, okay, we're putting together a lead crew. You guys will be on the lead crew. You're going to go over just before the war, and then as soon as we can get you back, we're pulling you back so you can start again qualifying the students that are still coming through the pipeline for training and all that. So we were thrilled, you know, rah, rah, rah. We're going to get to go over there and make something happen. So we take off, we head over. This was in Germany on the way over with some waitress in whatever layover point that we were at. Now, then a funny thing happened. After we got there, you all know that the president gets a briefing from all his commanders in chiefs about the war plan, right? What's going to happen? Because he has to sign off. The president has to authorize the plan that they've come up with. And they go through what the expected losses are if he follows this plan so that he understands that. Now, somehow, and I still cannot believe how this was leaked out. So we got a copy of the losses that were anticipated that were going to happen during the war. And as we flip through, we get to the AWAC, and it says you can expect, these are the brightest minds in the military, say based on Saddam's surface-to-air missile capability, et cetera, you're going to lose 2.5 AWACS. And we're going, okay, let me get this straight. So we're the lead crew. We're the only plane to go over Iraq the first night of the war. That's the most defended soil in the world because Russia's been supplying them. France has been supplying them. The U.S. has been supplying them. They've got an amazing command and control system. And we're going to be over that the first night. And 2.5 AWACS are going to get shot down. So that was kind of a wake-up call, to say the least. I mean, I was all of a sudden going, wow, I need to get my life together. You know, I'm really enjoying water skiing and all this kind of stuff, but I understand now why World War II soldiers came home and got married and had families, because that's what I was thinking. I need to have a family. I need to get married, you know. I'm too young to die. So it was interesting, to say the least. And then they started dropping all the body bags off, and they were for U.S. service members right there where we were in Riyadh. We've got pallets and pallets of body bags behind our housing facility that we were at, and we're going, this is lovely. Anyway, so why were they expecting that? I'll go into why operationally, but if you look at the fact that Iran has been trying to bomb Iraq for years and years and years, and the Soviets had given them the best surface-to-air missiles they had. The U-2 was shot down with an SA-2. They had SA-2 sites all over the country. We weren't as afraid of these because it's a fairly well set up. You have to set these things up. You have to have a radar there. We knew we could get these things targeted. So truthfully, not really worried about this weapon system. It was too easy to take out at the beginning of the war. But then you start to notice that you got the SA-3s. This could go up to 30 to 45,000 feet. Now you start to notice that a lot of these are now on treads, right? They're mobile. That's where the problem comes in. The SA-6, another very phenomenal weapon system. The SA-8, they had the SA-9, the 13, the 14, the 16. They had 16,000 surface-to-air missiles in total. And again, most of them were mobile. So we weren't going to, even with special forces in there, we weren't going to be able to target a lot of these beforehand. I love this. So one of the systems we would be going up against was the IHawk, which the U.S. made, right? Goes Mach 2.5, again, mobile, very, very capable weapon system. So I could get shot down by a missile that was made. That makes sense to me. The roll-in was so good. This shot down 2 Tornadoes and an A-10 during the war. Mach 5 French missile system that the U.S. bought and deployed with our troops. So again, pretty formidable. And we have no self-defense on the AWACS because the AWACS was never meant to be over. It should never have gone into harm's way. It was always intended to be behind the missile engagement zone or the threat, stay outside of the threat. So what happened was we were originally going to position 3 AWACS in Saudi Arabia looking north into Iraq, and then a 4th would be up there in Turkey, would deploy out of Turkey beyond the border up there. And that would give us, again, this is unclassified, between those 4 jets, pretty good coverage into Iraq if anything was coming down at our guys. But the problem was these are some of the missile engagement zones that we knew we had to stay outside of. But the problem was Turkey decided that they were not going to allow, just in case the coalition forces didn't win, they didn't want to get in trouble, so they would not allow an AWACS to fly out of Turkey. So we lost that northern AWACS. So they said, okay, our crew would go in and fly over Baghdad so that we could support all the planes coming in the first part of the war. Now, this is what happens. So you don't survive a crash in an AWACS. That was something I forgot to tell you. So this was a very low-speed run off the end of the runway in Japan of an AWACS. The thing crumples like nothing. It has the gear on board is so heavy. It's so overloaded. And then they said if you really hit the ground hard, the dome would come through and just mush everybody. So we had that to look for. This was Euclid 27, took birds on one side of the plane, taken off in Alaska, killed all 24 crew members on board. So that's what's going through our mind. You know, we're up there, it takes 1 missile, we have no way of knowing. We always had 2 fighters around us anytime we were over in country. And they were there so that if a jet came up at us, we could vector those F-15s at whoever was coming up against us. But the problem is they had raw gear. So they would be able to tell us that a missile was coming, and then they would depart, and we'd be sitting there. And we figured this is what, you know, our fate would be coming down. Because again, oh yeah, here's the pallets of body bags being unloaded behind us. We took a picture of. So, very, very, you know, they say no atheists in foxholes. I can tell you that, you know, our wing commander came on board the plane the night that we're taking off. You guys are doing a very brave thing for your country. It's great. And then he got off the plane and we're like, why don't you stay on board? Because then maybe. But there were very few atheists flying up into country that first night because, again, there'd be no warning, there'd be no anything, and we'd just get hit. But the first thing that happened is the 117s took off, which, you know, we all know now are 117 bombers, even though we called them fighters so we could get them through the black world because we had another stealth bomber coming through. But we had never worked with these guys because they had never flown outside of Area 51. So my first time talking to a 117 pilot was as they came up to go in country. And it was really fascinating because they would come up, they'd be talking to us, which means their radar is out. It means their communication antennas are out so we can see them. But then when they hit the border, they would just blink, go off the scope. You wouldn't hear anything. They would go do their thing. They would come back and they'd blink back on and then check back in with me. So really cool to watch these guys in a line just vaporize and disappear as they went across the border. We launched a whole bunch of Tomahawks. I'm sure you saw on the news, if you remember back then, Tomahawks flying down the streets of Iraq. So these were able to take out the radar sites, fixed weapon system missiles that we knew about. We launched 288 of them into country. I love the Tomahawks. I think they're wonderful. And then the big packages of planes came up, and that was just mind-blowing to be looking at my scope and seeing. I mean, I controlled 360 planes that first night to see just waves of planes coming forward, and they would all hit the tankers, and the tankers are milling around, and then they would break off, and I had a strike control. I was the strike controller hitting everything. So everything that went into Baghdad, Talil, first night I was controlling. And I had the guy, my check-in controller next to me would be checking all these guys in furiously so that we could make sure that they all came out alive. But to see 50 planes go across the border in one package was just amazing to see. And then to hear the chatter as these guys are being shot at. I mean, the SAMs were just continuous coming up. And these guys were so well trained, they'd been through so many exercises that to hear them calmly reporting that there's a missile coming up from over here to their wingman and watch out for this was amazing. Incredibly professional as they ingressed. We did drop, here's some Vietnam, right? Everybody knows what this is, the daisy cutter. So when the 130 would drop these, I would actually go up to the cockpit and watch it go off, because it really does look like, at night, it really looks like a nuclear bomb going off. And the same with the 16,500-pound butane bombs that we would drop out of the 130s. I'd go up and watch those things go off. And that's why they thought there was some reports that we're nuking them, because these things just create such an amazing shock wave when they go off. That's what one of them looks like. Again, that's not the nighttime. At night, it just lights up the ground all around when that thing goes off. It's incredible. So I was controlling these guys. We did amazingly well, as everybody knows. I've got some numbers of the number of aircraft that we lost. It was actually pretty low when you think about, we flew 100,000 sorties, roughly 100,000 sorties over there. And we only lost 75 aircraft total, 52 fixed wings and 23 helicopters. But for that number of sorties against the threats that we had, that's amazing. And people say, why did it go so well? Why did we lose? And this plane here, I was controlling two guys in an F-111, and all of a sudden they went off screen, they went off scope, they weren't talking to me, and they had reacted to a SAM, and they were too low and they hit the ground. So I was the last person to talk to them. As we all know, I love to see these type of images on TV, because you and I all know, having watched the coffins leaving Riyadh, these people should never get any press whatsoever. So again, why did we do so well? My opinion is because of these gentlemen. Basically, Bush told the military, you know how to kill things and break things and kill people. You go do what you need to do. He left them alone. So we were not hamstrung by the kind of ROE that I saw when I was in Afghanistan and leaving Afghanistan and Iraq in 2009, where the rules of engagement were so restrictive. It was mind-blowing. So that's what we did. We rolled in there. We did what we needed to do. And they surrendered by the thousands. I mean, when you have the number of planes coming over every night, those soldiers in the Iraqi army, they were just beat down. They never knew when a plane came overhead, is there a bomb coming off it or not? So do that day after day after day. So yeah, 100 days of that, you're going to surrender at first chance you get. And that's what happened. We had a couple of interesting, somebody asked, so what were any close calls? Our intel had said that there was an SA-2 site that went down the first night, and intel said, yep, it's been destroyed. So we were flying over it for 6 hours, and we are the epitome of a wonderful target to hit. We're flying figure eights right above them, so we're clearly a high-value target. And this thing came up. There's no reason for that radar. They knew once they turned their radars on after the first night, they knew they were a target. There was going to be a harm coming at them. So a lot of the sites just never turned their radars back on. Well, why these guys radiated for 6 hours, it means they had to have had a missile to launch, or you wouldn't have radiated. We were sitting right above them, but they never launched. So that was kind of a crazy thing when we found out that nobody had ever laid eyes on that site to see if it had been destroyed. They just made the assumption because it didn't come back up. And then the closest we came, which is really crazy, was one of our escorts. We say the pilot fell asleep, and I don't blame the guy. You're flying for how many hours in circles around a 707 in the pitch black night, the most boring mission in the world. Well, our pilot, Rich, sees the guy coming towards us, which he should never be pointed at us. So Rich turns on a couple of lights. Nothing. The guy's still coming at us. So he can take his palm and gang load and turn on strobes, bottom strobes, landing lights, everything with just one punch. So he turns every light on, and the guy doesn't change vector. He's coming right at us. So Rich noses over. I'm in the back, and all of a sudden we all go weightless, and we hear this roar coming over the top. And Rich said he could see the rivets on the bottom of the plane when the guy went over the top of us. So really, really close call. The pilot said he was changing frequencies on the radio, which there'd be no reason for him to change frequencies up there. But anyway, we say he fell asleep. His squadron commander said no. It was really awesome to see the Scuds. This was a big deal, as everybody knows. They were launching the Scuds at Israel. They were launching them at Riyadh. To take these things out was a high priority. But we could see them from the air. We were coming in one night, and one of them was re-entering the atmosphere right above us, and we called the field, and we said, hey, you guys locked down? And they said, nope. I said, well, give it about 10 seconds, and then sure enough, the alarms went off, and we were told to orbit and wait because the Scud had come in over Riyadh. What I really enjoyed was the fact that every time one of them came down, CNN would report exactly where the thing missed. Well, it was 3 miles south of Riyadh, and we're all going, so now we're forward spotting for the Iraqis, right? Every time one of these things came in. And they said, no, they're not listening to CNN. Well, then one of them landed, this was always fun. The Patriots would launch. The first night after we landed, we were up on the roof, and the Scud is coming in on the top left up there. It's re-entering the atmosphere, but the Patriots would go off, and boom, boom, takes them out. We're all up in the roof in our underwear going, USA. And somebody goes, what if there was chemical weapons on that? And we all went, oops. We ran back down, and we put our chemical weapon suits on like we were supposed to have on to begin with. But it was awesome to see the Patriots taking these things out, and the debris would just rain down on the field, and we ran out and got it, and I've got it in my pocket, and someone's like, it's got a lot of asbestos in that. Oh, that's not so good. But it did land. One of them did land and struck the barracks in Dhahran on February 25th. 28 killed, wounded over 100. CNN reported it. CNN put images out there like this, and Baghdad radio immediately noted that, and they were hailing the attack. They said the cowardly traitors who mortgaged the sacred places of the nation and turn Arab youth into shields of flesh, etc. So if they're not listening to CNN, how did they know that they hit that barracks, right after it was reported on CNN? So I still say CNN was a forward reporting post for the Iraqis. We all know they just surrendered en masse, which was great. For us, because they were so well dug in. That's why we're using daisy cutters and the 16,000-pound butane bombs, because they were dug in so well that we couldn't take them out. This was the highway of death. A lot of bad press came out of this. This was between Kuwait and Iraq. And February 26th, I controlled A-10 Warthogs that were hitting this road. We destroyed 1,400 vehicles that were retreating. We weren't trying to kill Iraqi soldiers at this point. We were only trying to take their equipment out so they couldn't wage war later on. So CNN's reporting these horrible images of soldiers that look like this, and this was on the cover of Time, etc. But I can tell you that I went to the A-10s after we landed, and I looked at their HUD tapes, and they hit the Leeds vehicles, they hit some trailing vehicles, that stops the entire convoy, and then they would overfly it 2 or 3 times, and all the soldiers are running out of the vehicles into the desert, getting away from it. So they gave them time to get out of the vehicles. Again, the intent was not to kill the troops, the intent was to take out the vehicles, so, and we did that very effectively. As everybody know, afterwards, Saddam just wreaked havoc on Kuwait, and the pollution that the oil fires, the oil he dumped into the Persian Gulf, absolutely horrible. I went back over there with Joint Stars after he, was killing the Kurds, and again, the intel reports that we got were just crazy compared to, I think, what came back. So on the left there, they talk about the chemical weapons. The Kurdish, he hit a city where he killed between 3,200 and 5,000 people, injured another 7,000 to 10,000 more, biggest chemical attack ever on a civilian city. He did not care about human life whatsoever. And then what really amazed me was the mass graves that they unearthed. This was that part of that chemical attack. I mean, there was one mass grave where they found over 100,000 bodies in there, Kurdish bodies. They shot the kids and the women behind the head with a .22 bullet. They machine gunned the men. They moved them all out in the desert, telling them they were relocating them, and then they bulldozed them into the graves. They had the marks on the bones to show that they were bulldozed in. So this guy had absolutely no regard for human life. So I was thrilled to death. There's some of the mass graves that they were uncovering over there. I was thrilled to death when this came along. I think that he has a special place in hell, in my opinion. But so that's my experience in Desert Storm. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Which aircraft are replacing the E-3A and the E-8A?
Yeah, isn't that a great question? So they keep saying that they're going to come up, they're retiring the E-8, as we know. They're mothballing them, and they do not have a replacement named yet. It's been in the works for years and years and years. Yeah, when I was on the E-8, the Army said, we will not go down a road, we will not move a convoy if there's not an E-8 overhead that we can talk to. I mean, they absolutely, we were their lifeblood to get strike aircraft and rescue and helicopters and everything in there. So I'm amazed that we're taking those out of circulation.
Hey, Colonel, I've got a good friend, Will Palfrey is his name, and he flew on AWACS and J-Stars, and I'm not sure on one or the other. I'm not sure which one he flew on, but he has a really unusual condition called electromagnetic sensitivity. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not, no. I hope I don't have it.
Yeah, he can't even be around a computer for a very long period of time, but it's very rare, and he believes that his flying on that aircraft actually caused the condition.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
Thanks, David. Hey, bud.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Chaplain Horowitz. I was a Jewish chaplain in Iraq and Afghanistan. I went twice to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. I didn't hear your whole speech, but I just want to say I was in a unit in the 82nd Airborne, 34 ADA. That we also well.
She was saying her husband was in the 82nd.
And I have 51 jumps and 50 landings. Can anyone figure that one out? No, I'm serious. 51 jumps and 50 landings. Anyone airborne here? Nobody? Okay, what do I mean by 51 jumps and 50 landings? Sir? Okay, one time I was hanging from a tree. But okay. So anyway, no one gets the joke. It's not a joke, it actually happened. That was my worst jump ever because it took me all day. I had to get the parachute out of the tree after that. So anyway, so what was I asking? So my question is, so my unit had the MLRS, Multiple Launch Rocket Systems. Yeah. I actually pulled it a few times, even though I'm a chaplain. Don't tell anybody. I actually pulled the thing, the MLRS. So what do you think about? Actually, the Marines did not have the MLRS. So my unit. Part of my unit was attached to the Marines, and we even part of my unit originally before 2000 in the beginning, they went with the Rangers to the desert.
Chaplain, we gotta get
Yeah, and they bombed the H1, H2.
Yeah.
They took care of that. That was part of my unit. So
thank you.
Yeah. And actually, I grew up in Israel, so that's very interesting because it all comes together. Because it was actually Saddam that threatened Israel, and anyway, but this is my first time in this meeting. But,
Thank you.
But I have a question for you. What's your rank?
I was Lieutenant Colonel.
I'm just a major, so sir, I have to call you sir. But anyway, what you said about no atheists in the foxhole, I promise you, every one of you, there's no atheist in the paratroop door. No atheist in the paratroop door. Remember that. There isn't. No such thing.
Thank you, Chaplain.
Yes.
Well, thank you for what you did for us. I'm Bill. I was on the ground at the line of departure the night in February when we went into Kuwait. It was cold, and one of the things that I didn't hear, I wanted to point out, was the leadership of those poor Iraqi soldiers. When they saw us coming, all of the officers had left. They had pulled back, and the NCOs, and they're out there by themselves with one blanket. And that contributed a lot to the flow of the prisoners of war that came back, and they were absolutely decimated. They'd been out there for weeks without being properly cared for and food. So that's leadership, and that's the reason they lost.
Absolutely.
True. Or as they say in Louisiana, true dat. Any other questions? Tom, that was excellent. We really appreciate you coming. I have a...
You know what, let me say one last thing.
Yeah, sure, go on.
So right now, I own two Christian Brothers Automotives. We want to be a light in the community. My home office has pledged to give 1,000 cars away this year. If you know a vet in need, if he or she has a vehicle, maybe needs repair that they can't afford to repair, please get in touch with me. Would love to help them out. So again, anybody with a vehicle that needs repair or a vehicle, if they do not have a vehicle and they need one, let us know, because we do help veterinary vet organizations, single mothers, et cetera. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is our, we don't pay anything, but we do give away a book. And this is a book of stories that were written by the people in this room about their time in Vietnam. If you're having trouble sleeping, when you read mine, it'll help you out. And we also have one of our challenge coins. So thank you very much for a great presentation. Appreciate it.